nickname, Henry. What's up? How are you guys doing? So I have to tell you, I'm here. I'm so excited to be here because you see, the love of my life, my best friend in the world, is a matador. Yeah. It's my husband, Doug Emhoff. And he always talks about CSUN and what it was like to be a student here. And he's now a really great lawyer practicing in LA. But he talks so much, and he and I have talked so much over such a long period of time about the significance and the importance of our community colleges and Cal State. It's so important. If he hadn't been here at CSUN and had the opportunities to have a meaningful education that was accessible and affordable, he would not have been able to go on to law school, and the rest of the story has been told. So I'm so happy to be with you students in particular today. You know, our Cal State system is one of the jewels of California. It really is. In fact, you know, I've been looking at it a lot in terms of what we need to do to actually support it in a better way. So for example, do you guys know the math has been shown for every dollar we put into Cal State, we get $23 back in terms of the return on the investment. An investment of $1 reaps the state and all of us $23. It's just the smart thing to do from an economic and a fiscal perspective. Much less what we are doing in investing, as Henry said, in our future. And understanding it's not about a cost, it's about an investment. Because when we put the resources into our students, and we put the resources into an affordable higher education for everyone, we know we are all lifted up, everybody. And so I just want to start by saying I am so proud of you students. I am so proud of you guys. Because you truly are the leadership of our state. And you guys have to just stick with it, because it is all about what you are going to do that is going to continue to show the best of who we are as a state and as a country. Henry, I think you are so amazing, and I'm so excited about the idea that he's going to be a senator in a California State Senate. So I think he said he will be, when elected, but we got to make sure we elect him, he will be the youngest member of the state senate. And you know what? It's important. It's important to have people of every background and every life experience. But he's going to be extraordinary. And you know, one of the things that happens around election cycles is people say, young people wish they would get out and vote, but they really don't. And, you know, love them, they're family members of ours, but are they going to turn out? Are they watching? Are they paying attention? I know the truth, which is that the answer is yes, yes, yes. And I also know when we have leaders like Henry in the state senate, we're going to do a better job, all of us, of hearing and seeing the voices of everyone, including the youngest members of our state. Henry, thank you. We have worked together for years on a number of issues in terms of foreclosures and what we need to do as a state for our poor people, for our children, and you've been an extraordinary leader, so I thank you guys. So listen, here's the deal. 7 days before the election, that's where we are. And the reason we're here this afternoon is to talk a little bit about the issues, but really also to ask for your help. Ask for your help to turn folks out and remind them that their voice is their vote and their vote is their voice. And so let's just talk about where we are at this moment in time. I think we are in this election cycle at one of the most pivotal moments in the history of our country. I think we are at an inflection point in the history of our country. You know, my parents met back when they were students at UC Berkeley in the 60s, when they were active in the civil rights movement. In fact, my sister and I, we joke, we grew up surrounded by a bunch of adults who spent full-time marching and shouting about this thing called justice. And I think we are at a moment in time that is similar to that moment in time that my parents met so long ago. I think it's a moment in time that, for example, many of us have experienced in our personal lives. You know, where circumstances and the situation require us to look in a mirror, and with furrowed brow, we are asking the question, who are we? I think this is that moment in time for our country, where we are collectively looking in a mirror, and with furrowed brow, we are asking a question, who are we? And I believe the answer is a good one. I believe we are a great country, imperfect though we may be. And part of what makes us great is we were founded on certain principles, on certain ideals. Those ideals that were, for example, written and spoken in 1776, that says we are all and should be treated as equals. Ideals that tell us that we are absolutely offended when someone would suggest people should be denied entry to our country because of the God they worship. Ideals that are under attack when someone would say a man can't be a judge in a court of law in our country because his parents were born in Mexico. Ideals that are being offended when someone would say, if I disagree with my opponent, it's okay to suggest my opponent should be jailed or shot. The ideals of our country are what is at stake in this election. And each one of us is being challenged to stand up and fight for our ideals. And then this is when I say, with a bit of bravado as a proud daughter of California, so goes California, goes the rest of the country. We have always been and are still that place that the rest of the country, if not the world, looks at and to for what change looks like. We are still that place that has been driven and motivated by what can be, regardless of what has been. You know that old adage, it's true, so goes California, goes the rest of the country. And I'm going to make a particular point of also this. And some of the most significant movements that started in California, that took on nationwide, started with who? Our students. So let's talk about what's at stake. Let's look at some of the challenges where California has been a leader. Well, look at, for example, what we know we need to do to fix a broken criminal justice system. We need reform. We have done a good job in California. There's more work to be done, but essentially this is it. We in California have said we are going to reject that false choice that on criminal justice policy suggests you're either soft on crime or you're tough on crime. Instead, we're going to ask, are we smart on crime? We're going to say, let's look at the public health model that has taught us so well. You want to deal with an epidemic, crime or health? Smartest, most effective, and cheapest way to deal with it is prevention first. If we're dealing with it in the emergency room or the prison system, much too late and far too expensive. We need to be smart on crime. In fact, I wrote a book back in 2008 called Smart on Crime, and you guys can get it for about $2.99 on Amazon. So knock yourselves out. California has been a leader. Let's look at the issue of immigration. So we have more immigrants, documented and undocumented, than any state in the country. In fact, 1 out of 2 Californians was born outside the country or has a parent that was born outside the country. Raise your hand if you fit that profile. Right. We know there are about 12 million undocumented immigrants in the United States. We have an outsized stake in the outcome of this conversation. So let's look at the situation. Supposed leaders are getting away with conflating criminal justice policy with immigration policy, as though they are the same thing. We know they are not. They're two separate policy areas with their own pathologies, their own variables, their own problems and solutions. And yes, there will be that extremely tragic case and thankfully rare case, like the one in San Francisco where a young woman was killed. And there's no question, and the prosecutor in me says, when the evidence proves that guy guilty, lock him up for as long as we can. But it is irresponsible to suggest that we would craft public policy for 12 million people around our collective outrage around one man's conduct. Equally wrong is to allow this conversation to take place around this misinformed, misguided term, illegal alien. Now, I've seen some of the worst of criminal behavior. I have seen some of the worst of crime. An undocumented immigrant is not a criminal, and we have to correct course on that conversation in this country. And California can lead the way. then finally on an issue, and there's so many more to talk about, but an issue that a lot of people come up to me and talk to me about, and that's the issue of guns. So California has been a leader in saying we're going to reject a false choice on gun policy that suggests you're either in favor of the Second Amendment or you want to take everyone's guns away. That's a false choice. We know in California that we need reasonable gun safety laws. That's why we banned assault weapons. That's why we require background checks before somebody can buy a gun. Now let's think about that. Background checks. Kind of reasonable. That you might want to know if somebody has been convicted of a violent felony before you let them buy a lethal weapon. Kind of reasonable. Kind of reasonable that you just might want to know if somebody has been found by a court to be mentally unstable to the point that they are dangerous to themselves or other people before you let them buy a lethal weapon. Kind of reasonable. Then let's look at the issue of assault weapons. Well, I've seen assault weapons kill babies and police officers. And the thing about it is this, I have lots of friends who like to hunt. If you need an assault weapon to go hunting, you need to go back to hunting school. So let's talk about what makes for reasonable gun safety laws, okay? And let's understand something. It seems, and we know as Californians, as leaders on this issue, that it makes sense that we have reasonable gun safety laws. But the challenge is a good one. It's a really great one, actually. And I'm going to remind us of two things that happened in recent history that point that out. One, a seated member of Congress acting in her official duties as a member of the United States Congress was shot in the head. Her name is Gabby Gifford. And the people who work with her every day, they break bread with her, she is familiar to them, they talk about their families. Not even out of loyalty, they don't act. Now let's also be clear, it wasn't like she was hanging out on the beach in Malibu or somewhere. She was acting in her official capacity as a member of the United States Congress. You would think out of self-interest they would have acted, and they failed to act. Then fast forward to Sandy Hook, where 6- and 7-year-old babies were slaughtered, and they failed to act. Now, I'm going to tell you guys what I think should have happened, and this is going to sound harsh. What I think should have happened is somebody should have said, all you members on the House side, all you members on the Senate side, you go in chambers, just you. We're going to lock the doors behind you, and we're going to spread out the autopsy photographs of those children. And you have to take a look at those photographs, and then you vote your conscience. And I know that sounds harsh, but when I was prosecuting homicide cases, every time I'd make the motion to the judge. Your Honor, may the jury see the autopsy photograph. Defense attorney would jump up and down every time, no, it's going to be too emotional and prejudicial. And the winning argument every time was, no, Your Honor. Because to see the photograph and what it depicts is probative of the state of mind of the person who committed this act, and of the nature of the harm to the human body their tool of destruction can cause. So many issues to talk about. I haven't even started talking about climate change and how California is a leader on that. Student loan debt, no question, we got to be a leader on that. We got to make community college free for all kids, and make sure that for any household where a student is coming from, where the household has an annual income, household income of $140,000 or less, college and university should be free. To be done. So I'm going to close with a couple of comments. When we point out what's broken, what needs to be fixed, when we're critical of what's not working, it's interesting how some people would suggest that that invites a question about one's love of country. I reject that notion. I say there are two definitions of what it means to be a patriot. There is one definition that suggests you defend your country whatever it does. And then there is the kind of patriot I believe us all to be. The kind that will fight each and every day for the ideals of our country. And that's what this election is about. And I'm going to remind in particular our students of a saying I like to paraphrase often from Coretta Scott King, who famously said, "The fight for civil rights," which means the fight for justice, which means the fight for equality, the fight for civil rights must be fought and won with each generation. And I think when she said that, she had 2 points in mind. One is that it is just the very nature of this fight for civil rights, for equality, for justice, that whatever gains we make, they will not be permanent. So we must be vigilant. And then 2, in understanding it's the very nature of it, do not despair. Do not despair. Do not throw up our hands when it's time to roll up our sleeves. Now is the time to get to work. And we've got 7 days to get this done. And in particular, for our students. You all, history is going to show, will have been a leader in taking us to the next place, to the better place, to the place where we know we can be, and to the place where we know we have to be if we're going to be a unified country that is based on ideals that are about fairness and equality and justice. So I thank you all so very much. Thank you. Get out there and work.